Do you think you already know what power looks like? You believe it announces itself through aircraft carriers, sanctions, and breaking news alerts. Because that is the only version the world has ever bothered to show you. But have you ever considered how a narrow corridor of water, barely wider than a mid-sized city, became the silent lever on which the entire architecture of modern civilization quietly rests? Why the nations that control this passage have never needed to fire a single shot to hold the global economy hostage? And why the ones that want to have always known exactly where to aim? Forget the diplomatic communiques and the ticker-tape anxiety of oil markets. The Strait of Hormuz is not simply a flashpoint waiting to detonate. It is a place where the oldest forms of human endurance, fishing, building, trading, speaking, coexist with the most consequential flow of energy the modern world has ever produced. Where salt miners and supertankers share the same 21 miles of water without ever quite occupying the same reality. This is not the strait you have been briefed on. This is a living system, ancient and adaptive, being reshaped quietly, continuously, and without headlines, by forces that no military exercise has ever been designed to address. This is the hidden war for Hormuz. The global oil market has a pressure point so precise that a single decision made within its borders can move the price of energy in every country on Earth within hours. That point is not a capital city. It is not a ministry or a trading floor. It is a channel of open water, 21 miles across at its narrowest, through which approximately 21 million barrels of crude oil pass every single day, representing 1/5 of the world's entire petroleum supply and a third of all globally traded liquefied natural gas. The Strait of Hormuz connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the broader Indian Ocean. On its northern shore, Iran. On its southern edge, the UAE and Oman. In between, shipping lanes barely 2 miles wide in each direction, navigated daily by vessels the length of 4 city blocks, carrying cargo whose market value exceeds the GDP of most nations. There is no functional alternative. The pipelines that bypass the strait, Saudi Arabia's East-West pipeline, the UAE's Habshan-Fujairah route, carry a fraction of the strait's volume and require years of lead time to expand. The economies of Japan, South Korea, India, and China draw between 60 and 90% of their crude oil imports through this passage. Europe's energy exposure, restructured dramatically since 2022, runs directly through it. The strait is not a vulnerability in the global energy system. It is the system, its central premise, and its least examined assumption. What makes Hormuz uniquely dangerous is not the threat of a conventional military confrontation. It is the extreme asymmetry between the cost of disruption and the cost of defense. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy operates from a network of hardened coastal positions along the northern shore, embedded within the island geography of the strait in ways that make them extremely difficult to neutralize from the air without risking broader escalation. Their exercises in the strait have grown more sophisticated with each passing year, simulating coordinated missile salvos, electronic warfare disruption of navigation systems, and the rapid mining of shipping lanes. The United States Fifth Fleet, headquartered in Bahrain, exists specifically to counter this threat. It maintains a persistent presence in the Gulf and conducts freedom of navigation operations designed to signal that the strait will remain open regardless of Iranian preference. But signal and guarantee are not the same thing. Every naval analyst who has modeled a strait closure scenario reaches the same conclusion. Even a partial, temporary disruption lasting 2 to 3 weeks would produce an oil price shock capable of triggering a global recession. This is the hidden war, not fought with declared hostilities, but with the continuous calibration of threat and counter-threat in a space where the margin between deterrence and catastrophe has never been comfortable. But beneath the strategic overlay, something older and more patient is also being reshaped. The waters around Hormuz Island and the Strait's peripheral islands support one of the most ecologically anomalous reef systems on the planet. Persian Gulf surface temperatures in summer regularly reach 96 degrees Fahrenheit. A thermal threshold at which coral systems elsewhere in the world undergo mass bleaching events that can destroy centuries of reef structure within a single season. These reefs do not bleach. Over thousands of years of exposure to the Gulf's extreme thermal cycling, they have developed a degree of heat tolerance that represents one of the most significant documented cases of adaptive evolution in modern marine biology. Their physiology encodes a survival strategy refined under conditions that would have eliminated less resilient individuals across countless generations of selection pressure. The reefs support more than 700 fish species. They sustain the protein supply of coastal communities across the northern Gulf Coast. They define where traditional fishing grounds have been maintained for generations. Where nets are set, where knowledge of the sea was first accumulated and passed on. But the evolutionary process that made them resilient to heat operates on timescales measured in thousands of years. The current suite of threats, oil contamination from the Strait's daily tanker traffic, chemical runoff from expanding coastal infrastructure, and the direct physical disturbance of military activity within reef zones, imposes pressures for which no biological adjustment is possible within the time available. Survival is not a metaphor here, it is a mechanism. And as in all the hidden wars being fought within this strait, the most consequential damage is the kind that produces no immediate headline. The reshaping of Hormuz's power geography did not begin with the Iranian Revolution of 1979, or the tanker wars of the 1980s. It began in 1507 when a Portuguese fleet under Afonso de Albuquerque seized control of the island of Hormuz and established the first European strategic presence in the Persian Gulf. Albuquerque understood what every power that followed him would eventually rediscover: whoever controls the passage controls the price of everything that moves through it. The Portuguese held Hormuz for more than a century, extracting revenue from every vessel that transited the strait and using the island as the keystone of their Indian Ocean trading empire. The fortifications they built on Hormuz Island, their stones still visible, still red-orange against the Gulf sky, were not defensive structures. They were statements about who had the right to tax a sea. The Safavid Persians reclaimed the island in 1622 with British naval assistance, a transaction that established a template still operating today. Outside powers trading access and alliance with Gulf states in exchange for influence over the passage. The British presence in the Gulf that followed lasted in various forms until 1971. It was succeeded, almost without interruption, by the American strategic commitment that has structured Gulf security ever since. What is being reshaped today is the durability of that commitment. As the United States has moved toward energy self-sufficiency through its own domestic production, the strategic calculus that justified maintaining the world's most expensive forward naval deployment in a region that no longer supplies the majority of American oil imports has grown harder to defend domestically. The hidden war over Hormuz is also a war over whether the architecture of Gulf security built over 50 years remains viable, or whether the nations that depend most heavily on the strait's continued operation will be required to provide more of their own guarantee. On the Omani side of the strait, in a fjorded inlet of the Musandam Peninsula accessible only by sea, the village of Kumzar holds something that no geopolitical analysis has ever found a category for. Kumzari is a spoken language assembled from fragments of Persian, Arabic, Portuguese, Hindi, and several other tongues deposited by the centuries of traders, sailors, and occupiers who transited the strait without staying. It is, in strictly linguistic terms, a living archive of the strait's entire commercial history. Every empire that passed through, recorded not in stone, but in the daily speech of a few hundred people on a cliff above the sea. The village's geographic isolation, reachable in calm conditions by roughly an hour of open water from the nearest road, historically protected both the community and its language from the homogenizing pressures that dissolved similar hybrid tongues elsewhere in the Gulf. But the hidden war being fought here is generational. Younger Kumzaris increasingly relocate to Kasab or Muscat for work and education. The connectivity that reaches isolated places in the form of satellite internet and mobile networks tends to dissolve what isolation once preserved. When Kumzari disappears, and the linguists who study it consider its disappearance a matter of when rather than if, what will be lost is not merely a language. It is the only record that exists of how the strait was actually experienced by those who watched every empire move through it and stayed when all of them had gone. The hidden war reshaping global oil power through the Strait of Hormuz is not fought along a single front. It is fought simultaneously across military, ecological, economic, and cultural terrain by actors who do not share a common language, a common timescale, or a common understanding of what is actually at stake. Iran calibrates its naval posture to maintain maximum deterrence at minimum cost. The United States maintains a presence designed to reassure allies who are increasingly uncertain whether the reassurance remains credible. Gulf states invest in bypass infrastructure they hope they will never need. Marine biologists document coral adaptations that may hold keys to reef survival the world will desperately require. Craftsmen in boatyards build wooden vessels using knowledge that exists nowhere except in their hands. Women on Hormuz Island wear masks that carry genealogical information no database has recorded. And in Kumzar, an elderly fisherman uses a word that arrived on a Portuguese trading vessel 5 centuries ago, not knowing it and not needing to. This is how the world's most consequential waterway is actually being reshaped, not through the dramatic confrontations that dominate the coverage, but through the slow, simultaneous pressure of forces that no single actor controls and no single strategy addresses. The Strait has always been this, a place where the weight of global systems presses down on the lives of people who never asked to be at the center of anything and who have survived by developing, across centuries, a quality of attention to their particular environment that the institutions now managing that environment have never quite learned to replicate. The question the Strait leaves open, quietly, without instruction, is whether the decisions being made about it are being made by people who have actually looked at what it contains. This is not a story that ends at the water's edge. Across the world, corridors like this one are being subjected to the same compounding pressures, and the hidden war being fought within them will define the terms of global power long after the headlines that covered them have been forgotten. The reshaping has already begun. The only question is who is paying attention. If you're enjoying this video, hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts. Share it with someone who needs to see this. And if you're not subscribed yet, you know what to do. We've got a lot more coming your way.